All right.
Okay, perfect. Cheeky, we are live, my friend.
Hello, we're back again.
Absolutely, and I guess I would love to continue from where we kind of left off in our discussion. So I guess my position is that both candidates, both Trump and Hillary, are really, really bad for very, very different reasons. Trump, I mean, some of the policies that he's, kind of put together and spoken of are quite literally insane, absolutely insane. So, for example, I mean, he wants to default on U.S. debt, ignoring the fact that doesn't just harm the creditors of the United States, but it sends essentially civilization back about 30 or 40 years, if we're lucky, since those creditors are also simultaneously the United States' biggest trading partners. And also, I mean, there's a chance that's going to lead to war. I mean, China, have...
As you just said, their creditors are their biggest frenemies at the same time. And yeah, just saying something like that about loans, defaulting on them, is enough to devalue currency. So that was really stupid.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And that is my concern, because, I mean, one of the things you brought up is that the U.S. banks, and even just the international banks, are unlikely to politically permit the United States to default on debt. But there is always just the worry that just the talk of defaulting on debt essentially cripples the entire bond market. And the reason that's so destructive is that the United States simply can no longer pay off its foreign debt. Even, there was a really, really interesting video that I watched the other day where this academic pointed out that even if we completely, I think we have a billion barrels of oil, in reserve. Even if we took that out and sold it onto the international markets, every single barrel of oil that we still have, or expected barrel of oil, we would not be able to pay off the debt. So the bond market is the only thing at this stage keeping, let's say, the U.S. economy afloat through the sale of bonds. So crippling the bond market by talking of not, honoring their debt obligations does the same thing. So that is my worry. But of course, I mean, I do agree with your sentiment that Hillary is completely and utterly, possibly insurmountably corrupt, and ill-suited to such a role due to the lack of, just due to the lack of honesty. She's a politician as opposed to a leader, and there's a difference.
And if you are anybody who's been trained in knowing when people are lying, like I have, like that was my first psychological job, so to speak, was the training in detecting lies and when people are not being honest. And Hillary doesn't do anything while is genuine. Even her emotional states are completely devoid of real emotion. You can pretend emotion, but you can't pretend genuine emotion. And you see absolutely no real human genuineness about what she says. She couldn't care less. She would say anything you want with the same face, with the exact same face. She is so I've talked to another and a couple more people who are in the deception industry, and they're all going, oh my God, how could anybody be taking this woman seriously, because she's just about everything she does. Yeah, she's a complete
she's a
sociopath.
Absolutely.
And so that's what the main danger is. But for the rest of us who are on the side of, in the psychology side and in the abnormal psychology, that I just finished graduating from. Congratulations, Gabe. There's my third degree.
Congratulations.
But Yeah, abnormal psych. When you look at her, you can see her have grand mal seizures, prefrontal cortex like seizures in her everyday life. You see her lose balance. You see her have this sympathetic storm is what its actual technical name is. But what it is the brain fires off all at once, just like anybody who has epilepsy. But instead of falling down and jiggling on the ground, she goes off into her own world. And you could see that happen. She's watching the balloons come down next to her husband and everything. And you see this truly absurd facial expressions on her face. That's a seizure. This woman is most certainly not medically competent to carry out this task. It scares me to death.
I do agree with you there. I think the issue that we face within the Western political process is that the vast majority of politicians kind of sit on a spectrum from either dangerous psychopath or narcissist. And possibly for the first time, we have two individuals who are on complete opposites of that spectrum. So Hillary is, of course, a completely dangerous, sociopath. I mean, whether she's psychopathic as well is possibly, something for another discussion. But she's certainly a sociopath. And Donald Trump is a complete and utter narcissist. And that's where I guess possibly for the first time, I actually don't know who's worse.
Definitely, he's an egotist. Power is his drive. That's where he gets it from. Every time you used to watch him on that show, what was it? The one, and he'd say, "You're fired." You can see him getting off on it.
Absolutely.
And that's egopathy. That's kind of antisocial personality sort of stuff. But people who are really, really capable in these fields, leadership fields, are people what are highly strung, A-type personalities, and ones that basically have at least some sort of sociopathy, and that we call it ASPD now. That's a whole spectrum of them: egopathy, psychopathy, sociopathy, and a couple other pathies that are obscure. But he's egopathic. Okay. He's not sociopathic. He's just on his. He loves the power thing.
Yes, absolutely.
But that's a leadership role trait. Sometimes you just must not have to give a shit about what people think in big business,
Well, I agree with you there that is one of the traits of leadership suited to potentially running a country as large as the United States. I guess, again, the concern that I have are with specific policies and ideas that he's put forward, repudiating U.S. debt, supposedly building a wall.
Joking about that's dangerous.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But also just the protectionism. I mean, what we certainly don't want to have is a return to the kind of Smoot-Hawley tariff, which crippled international trade by something like 60% within a couple of months of the Great Depression. So, because of course, I mean, what then happens is, of course, if America puts up tariffs, as Trump has stated, he would like to do, the other countries will retaliate. And then what they will likely do in retaliation is that they'll devalue their currencies to make their exports...
or make them unavailable. That's the other thing.
I don't think they have that option. So for example...
Yeah, they do. No, actually, it's illegal. It's against international law, but China's done it twice. Made their currency unavailable to avoid devaluation. So it's very, very illegal. If you are caught by it, doing it, there could be extreme and dire consequences. The worst one they did was they took their currency offline for 28 hours in 2010. along with a huge hack of the internet in 2010 as well, what were both extremely immoral acts as far as the international community is concerned, and highly illegal. And I'm quite sure that some countries, if they can, will block off trade of their currency when it's being devalued.
Of course.
And that's a dangerous thing, because that creates wars.
You're completely right. Again, when you said that they would remove it, I thought you meant their exports, because removing their exports from the international market.
No, it just means trade in their currency. They just stop trade in their currency.
Of course.
And if Saudi Arabia goes from the greenback standard to a gold standard, and China goes to a Asian standard currency, America will have then an option to behave poorly in that arena. But the way things are going, if they don't ease up on the reins, we are most certainly going to see a war between socialism and democracy. And it's going to be very hardcore. China, since Hillary's been mucking around, if people don't know this already, she's been mucking around with the Chinese delegates a lot. She's even been to China and goading them on certain facts. And I think that it's one of the reasons why they're so adamant about the South China Sea. It's absolutely vital to them to defend themselves from America, or actually NATO as such. And why it's so important to Australians who gets in the next American elections is the fact that Putin has already said he won't deal with Hillary, and he would only respect Donald Trump if Hillary got in and she didn't take a strong stance against the occupation of the South China Sea. Then what would happen is they will block that part of the sea to stop people from trading in Southeast Asia, where all the cheap markets are. India, these huge cheap labor market is what I'm talking about. Yeah. And the actual consequences of what she's been doing and what America's been backing, with the Democrats have been backing, we actually in Australia have had compromised naval security. We've had Chinese subs coming into our territorial waters and things like that, incursions, and they've actually what can only be described as intentionally being caught, because they come in and they just stop and they do all these things just to let Australia know that they have submarine power and nuclear submarine power. So if this South China Sea isn't handled correctly, it's going to directly directly affect Australia straight away. That's the first point, what's going to hurt us the most. And as I said in my video, the total war at the hands of Democrats was if we don't have the West, that is, or America, don't have the power, the approval of Russia to squeeze China back into line, we're going to have a war. There's just absolutely no way to avoid it at this stage. And you'll see on Russia Today, they recorded a UN meeting, and then they did a private, what would you call it? A junket. That's what they call it, with other, media. And, what he said was that if we don't handle this properly and we continue this threatening behavior, especially with the missile platforms in Europe, that it is such a dire situation that it's moving the whole world in a direction of complete and total destruction, because it's that important to Russia. They're fighting for their survival because their only outputs are oil and guns, bombs.
Yes,
Yep.
But I guess the issue that I see is this, and I don't completely disagree. I mean, part of the reason the South China Sea is now such a political issue is that America has, at a minimum, I think it's just in Darwin alone at any one time, about 10,000 troops in that part of the world. And of course, it's a holdover from, at least in part, from the Second World War and the deterrence against Japan. So ever having Japanese nationalism and the kind of imperial, the behavior that goes along with that. But right now, that just the 10,000 contingents of troops there is essentially pointed at China. So China absolutely, just from a kind of self-preservation point of view, is forced to then take far more aggressive action in the South China Sea than otherwise warranted. But the other issue, but I was just going to say, I mean, the other issue that I see is this, that the reason I'm not a huge fan of the way Putin is now getting involved, saying, look, I will deal with Trump, but I certainly won't deal with Hillary, is that Putin has done this before. In fact, part of the reason, if you remember back to the 2008 election between Obama and McCain, Putin was coming out to say, look, McCain's very, very hawkish, and I see a war coming unless you guys elect Obama. And Obama then took on the default very, very early on in the election as the kind of peace candidate. And that's, I don't know if anyone remembers, but it was after that time that Putin came out to say, I want Obama in power. That's when Obama very deliberately started talking about closing Guantanamo, bringing the troops home. And that is, I mean, Putin handed him, for all intents and purposes, his election platform. So, of course, look, again, both are uniquely bad. I mean, McCain's a warmonger.
Well, what Putin said back in 2008 was that Obama had been actively involved in the discussion and the agreements, and that he found Obama to be a reasonable man, what could be negotiated with. Absolutely. He didn't actually go out of his way to say, no way, I'm going to not deal with this person. With Hillary, he's just said no.
Agreed. But it's I mean, obviously I'm not an American, neither are you, but I mean, the average American out there wants...
But it affects us. What happens now affects us because we're both very kind of close to the danger zone.
No, you're right, but does the average American out there want Putin, essentially for all intents and purposes, deciding not only the campaign platform that the politicians take up, but who gets elected? Because this makes a huge amount of difference. Having one of the leader of one of the world's superpowers coming out to say, I can better deal with this guy. That really, at least in my opinion, does change on some level the outcomes of elections. If only just the super delegates, the way they vote, so it does make a difference. I guess the other issue that I see, which I think is just as important, is that yes, on some level, we're discussing what's happening in the political kind of climate, what will happen if Trump gets into power. But I think both of these candidates are overshadowed by just the vast amounts of debt. So not only the national debt, the size of the bond market, which has become ridiculous, the size of the derivatives market, and I use the trade derivatives, and the market is now multiple times larger than the real economy. But also, I mean, corporate. I was just
I was just going to say that, yeah, that's why they like Hillary as their candidate, is because she will go with the status quo and increase, the debt. What were you going to say?
Oh, no, I agree with you there that Hillary, I mean, I think she stated very, very clearly that she doesn't, foresee any change. But also, I mean, the biggest issue I think we now have, which is even probably far more dangerous than the size of the derivatives market, and we will likely have a collapse in the derivatives market after a while, but because too much money is flooding into a market where the underlyings are falling apart. So unless a lot of people are bearish on the market and basically either buy put options or sell call options, I think everything's going to fall apart there. But also the other issue that I see is that corporate debt is now something like 29 trillion just in the States. Corporate debt, and companies are not doing very well. I mean, for example, if you look into the U.S. financial market, just the stock market last year, that was essentially driven by 4 or 5 companies. So you had Google, you had a couple of other companies. So
Microsoft.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. So in fact,
and Apple. That's it. That was the other one. Microsoft and Apple. Yeah.
Absolutely. So their growth drove most of the stock market gains last year. I mean, when you took out those 4 or 5 companies, the stock market performed really, really badly, and we're seeing the same this year. I mean, we had a brutal start to the stock market this year. Lost a lot of value. Some of that value's come back. Some of it's disappeared again, and the reason for that is because there is simply so much corporate debt, and most of this debt has not been used productively. So what these companies have done, because of the very, very cheap money, I mean, you can borrow at maybe 0.5%, which is ridiculous, is that they've taken on vast amounts of debt, and instead of investing that in productive capacity, in lowering costs, what they've done is that they've initiated share buyback programs to essentially shore up the value of their debt. So most of this money has been completely and utterly wasted. And I think that is far more dangerous. So it almost doesn't matter who gets into office, when you have a corporate debt bubble, when you have a looming student loan bubble.
I would prefer someone, honestly, if it was my country, okay, I'd be looking for somebody who has business experience. Plug Trump there, no. But
yes and no.
In fact, he does. He does have a experience in this particular thing. But what's happening and what is not told to the American public straight up is the reason why China is in the South China Sea and plugging away at that is the fact that it's got the backing of Russia for the simple reason to stop or try to reduce America's monopoly on the price of oil.
Absolutely.
Because the South China Sea's got more oil, and America, if China backs down, America can access that oil through the Philippines and then drive down the price of oil again, hitting the Russian economy and driving it down again. This is just as good as war. I mean, what America doing to Putin, they might as well be shooting at each other because it's warfare. It's economic warfare. And what most people don't know, coming out from underneath the red curtain of China, and what they don't want anybody else to know, is that their economy is slowing down dramatically.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And where that stems from is Chinese people, workers are getting paid too much now. So companies are looking at places like the Philippines, Thailand, Singapore, because the labour market's cheaper there.
Absolutely.
And China wants to block people accessing that cheap labour. So basically what they want to do is set up in the South China Sea, get entrenched there. That way they can charge a levy for going through their waters. And as well, making it harder to access cheap labor that will indefinitely in the future reduce their economic growth, and that means their military plans and all that are going to be put on hold because it is a hegemony war. It's not that normal war. It's a transfer of power. China is becoming, if China's becoming powerful enough now, economically and militarily wise, to support Russia as a legitimate, legitimate adversary to America, where America has been in the golden era of total global domination. And I don't think they like the idea of giving up that power. And that's those things. That's where the Crimean comes in. That's where the South China Sea come in. That's where it is. It's there at the moment. They're moving their chess pieces about and pissing each other off. But it only takes one bullet for that to turn into a nightmare, because as soon as China starts anything, a shooting war with anybody, Russia has to assume straight away that the missile platforms in Europe are a threat and they have to destroy them. As soon as that's done, there's no coming back. And as Putin said, the way this is, once this war starts, it's not going to end until people start flinging nukes at each other. I think that might be a bit more, a bit too alarmist, but it wouldn't be far from the truth, though.
Of course,
and it is. You know,
well,
it is a violation of the original treaty, the nuclear treaty. You know, you weren't allowed to have missiles that could stop another country's nuclear potential, because of the simple reason the nuclear holocaust is the basic thing what keeps countries from pressing the red button. As soon as you've got a country that feels like, oh yeah, I can beat this country at nuclear war, they're going to have a bigger tendency to press the red button. You know, but if they've got an absolute necessity, you know, it's going to be total destruction, then they're not going to do it, are they?
Well, I do agree with you partially. I mean, one of the things I just want to answer, just before kind of coming back to you, is that Zeta has asked, you know, what happens to precious metals post-elections? Of course, nobody knows, but I'm just going to hypothesize. If Hillary gets into power, I don't see a huge amount of change in precious metals, simply because she's seen as very experienced. So I think it's going to be business as usual for the precious metals market. But I am going to go out and on a limb and say, if Trump is elected, I think precious metals will go up very, very drastically. So what I'm certainly, absolutely, I mean, so what I'm certainly saying is that if Trump gets into power, I'm going to be increasing my positions in gold and silver, or almost immediately. If it's very, very clear he's going to win, or literally I wake up and I see a Trump U.S. president, I'm immediately buying more gold and silver. And there's a very, very simple reason behind that. And it's because he's seen as a far less experienced candidate. Yes, he has business experience, so, I get that, but he hasn't been in the kind of machinery of the state. He's not a friend of Wall Street, at least that's how he's perceived. So I think it's going to be very, very positive for the gold market, and also negative for the economy if Trump is elected. But what tends to be negative?
There could be a little bit of inflation and stuff there, because he's going to make huge adjustments. And whenever people get concerned, the stock market starts showing the symptoms of that. Exactly. And if you want to talk about the precious metals market, forget silver, gold, or any of those. Just forget them, because then if Hillary gets in, there could be a war. It'd be status. A lot of people have said just that. But if you want to have securities in a time of war and of peace, you go for the right kind of precious metals: cadmium, lithium, beryllium, things that are used in high-level technologies that means are going to hold their value, either being used in phones in a normal market, or if they're being used in guidance systems in weapons of war. You've got the security of both markets there. And I can't think off the top of my head the particular best ones. Titanium, trillium, cadmium,
rhodium,
lithium. Yeah, a lot of the really rare metals. Those are the ones you want to have in your pocket. If the shit hits a fan as well, you'll be able to sell them later if nothing happens.
Well, but I guess the reason that, at least in the precious metals market, that I don't invest outside of gold and silver, I mean, just for two reasons. The first is the liquidity of the market. So with gold, you have such a tight kind of bid-ask. So, and just to explain why bid-ask is so important, I know this is going very slightly off topic. If you have a stock or a commodity with, let's say, it's selling for $1, but so you can buy it for $1, but then when you sell it back onto the market, it's 90 cents. Your position has to move at least 11 cents for you to make a profit, and that's what 12%. Yeah. So and that doesn't happen very often. So what you want whenever you're picking up any commodity is an incredibly tight bid-ask price. Otherwise, I mean, it just has to move so much
under
more.
Normal conditions, though, if conditions go way off the scale anywhere, becomes anything that cannot be predicted or go off the track that nobody thought would be coming. If things go in a strange direction, these sort of currency markets are going to there's no guarantee that they're going to be worth anything, at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
But with precious metals, the ones that they desperately have to use, because those ones are the ones you really want to have investment in, because if one mining and stuff like that, most of these precious metals come from the bottom of the ocean. These mining things stop happening. There's instantly a necessity for that, and anybody who's got even the smallest amount of these metals are going to become very rich very quick. And if nothing happens,
but the only
would stay the same price.
So it's not that I disagree with you, but the average investor out there cannot easily access, let's say, the lithium market. The gold market and the silver market is far more accessible. You have an incredible amount of liquidity. That's why you have such a tight, narrow bid-ask, which is excellent for you. So if gold goes up 3 cents and you're long gold and you have a 1 cent, bid-ask, you've just made 2 cents in profit on whatever position you have. And you won't have that in the lithium market because there isn't a huge secondary market. So it's not that these investments aren't great. It's just that for just the average guy out there, gold and silver are probably far better, but not only because you have a secondary market, but just...
Well, I wouldn't say silver so much, because if you work out at the moment, silver, it won't give you enough interest on your bonds or the amounts of silver than what it costs to store that silver. So basically, in silver, you're losing money these days. Gold, yeah, it's fine. Silver, no.
No, absolutely, I agree. And
unless you're going to bury in your backyard, that is. Sorry, you can do that.
I think you've pointed out a very, very interesting quirk of the silver and gold market, that in times of peace, gold usually does far better. In times of conflict, or at least historically, is that silver tends to do better. So when there's massive inflation and possibly some kind of a war, silver does, far better. And I think it's due to the divisibility of it. So a couple of silver coins, you can use it to buy lunch. So as a result, it's just in far higher demand than a gold coin, which is maybe worth $1,000, and it's very, very difficult to be able to leverage that against just smaller assets. So you are completely right that when we have peace, gold usually does better. I mean, that ratio has held so far. When we have conflict, silver is an infinitely better investment. So again, I would say if there's ever some kind of a war out there, to the extent that money even matters, the silver market's where you want to be. And the extent that we have peace, the gold market's where you want to be.
Well, let's have a look. There's two good examples of this. One in Germany and once when the Soviet Union fell over, that the amount of money that was printed, during this period of time, straight after the war in Germany, they printed more money. You had to take a wheelbarrow of money down to your local baker just to buy a loaf of bread.
Agreed,
now, a piece of silver on the other hand, a piece of silver, it doesn't matter how much the paper money's printed, how much you need of that, the silver will still have its value. And instead of going down to the store with a barrow of debt money, paper debt money, you can just flick over a silver, I've forgotten what they're called just a silver coin, and you can buy your bread, Yeah,
agreed, absolutely. So if you take like a Liberty silver of some sort, or even just a hunk of sterling silver, whether it's jewelry silver or whatever, it makes a huge difference. So I do agree with you there. I mean, there are certainly nuances in these markets, but again, I guess the issue that I see is that while conflict is a possibility, and I hope a small possibility, the other issues which I think are going to really, really decide whoever gets into power, their presidency will ultimately be decided by the biggest issue that we have in the world right now, which is debt. So, again, as I said earlier, the U.S. Level of corporate debt is $29 trillion, and that cannot be paid back because corporate profits are not as high as they were, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago. Most companies are now doing very, very poorly, and the entire stock market is held up by about 4 or 5 different stocks.
Well, just one point, before we move on or anything like that. Look, just the character alone of Hillary Clinton is enough for you not to vote for her, because she's going to bend over to any lobby group, any big business. She's just going to go, yeah, sure, with no concern for the country. Whereas, lobbyists will come up to, against Trump, and there's a chance he might say no, But with Hillary, it's always going to be yes. Even if that drives America into the ground.
I don't disagree with you, and I'm not just trying to appease you here, but because what you're saying does make a lot of sense, that Hillary is by and large the candidate for big business and lobbyists. So I don't disagree with you there. I think she's had this track record throughout all of her time in political office. I guess the reason that I'm still concerned about Trump, and I don't like either candidate, but my concern with Trump comes due to this attitude of belligerence, the prescriptions he has for the U.S. economy, which I think will not only just harm the U.S. economy, but the entire world. The idea of defaulting on debt, the idea of getting, quote unquote, tough with people around the world. We're no longer in the 1920s where America was the only superpower. Now we have at least 4 other nations who, obviously, they don't quite have the U.S. military might, but they're certainly no longer pushovers. You have a very, very strong, Russia. You have a very, very strong China, despite the failings of its economy. You have Australia. So the U.S. cannot run around in the manner it did in the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s. And I don't think that has quite gotten across to Donald Trump. And again, that's the, as Sam Harris said, Donald Trump is never going to get onto television and blind you with his brilliance. And I think on some level, whoever's, in that office absolutely needs to, because the issues that we face in the world cannot be solved by deporting 11 million people or repudiating debt or trying to refinance the U.S. economy. I mean, the U.S. economy cannot be run in the same way that you run a golf course or a casino. And Donald Trump, it seems, on some level, isn't sharp enough to have figured that out.
Yeah, I think he just falls back to what he knows.
Yeah.
And what he knows, because he knows that's going to come out the right way. He's not going to look like a jackass when he starts actually talking about things he doesn't understand, But I do see him being tougher on big business. He knows what the game is, but it's not an ideal situation. But there needs to be somebody in office that's not going to sell America, by the shovel load, like Hillary is. And it just alone, her health is enough for just about anybody, if they know about it, would give them pause to put her in power in their country. And those health concerns trump everything else. And just to add corruption on top of that, and her lobbying corruption and her ties to the Muslim Brotherhood and Saudi Arabia, and the way she's treated China, and the way she's talked to Putin, actually, which she disrespected him as well. RT come up with that, but I'll take that with a grain of salt. That she's just, how would you say, just not legit. She's just not capable at this point and time. I mean, you could have got away with it years ago when the economy was running well and all the rest of it. Yeah, Hillary, and she was younger and she didn't have all these health concerns, especially mental health concerns. It would have been a good showdown, but at the moment there's just absolutely no way that the whole world can deal with the fallout of Hillary being elected. Certainly Australia will see most of its waters taken over and maybe even Chinese guns pointed at us. So,
but I guess on some level, one does recognize the concern, that the Chinese have, that the US have troops stationed permanently across Australia. And as a result...
Not only that, in Guam.
Absolutely. Guam, Japan, the Philippines, and so absolutely Taiwan. I mean, I don't think they have troops stationed in.
No, they do. They used to in Taiwan.
Okay,
is what I was going to say.
So China does have, I mean, as a sovereign nation, does of course have a right to defend itself. But I guess, I mean, so for example, in May 2016, Trump came out to say he wants to abolish the minimum wage, and then in June 2016, he came out to say he wants to increase the minimum wage, and that almost encapsulates a lot of the concerns that I have with the man. He doesn't actually have kind of set idea or set policy, like
that's a very good point.
Like
that's a very good point. Yeah.
Like any other candidate, but maybe just with far more frequency, he tends to just kind of go with whatever works, and I maybe that just kind of drives to the heart of it. But the minimum wage is either a good idea or it's a bad idea. You either have a policy that supports it or you don't. And this is something that I've seen consistently with Trump. Earlier on it's that we're going to, increase taxes on businesses. Then he's at another rally, a couple of months later saying we're going to decrease them. And maybe this is just, maybe I'm being overly harsh on the man, but and holding him up to a standard which isn't expected of other politicians.
Well, I would keep it in mind as well that that demonstrates that the man is prepared to say, yeah, I've changed my mind on this, I was wrong on this, this was stupid, you know. I don't see any other candidate doing that.
Yeah, you are right. You are right. I mean, unless it's going to cause them to very, very clearly lose an election, they'll kind of dig in, and they'll really hold steadfast. Yeah, so I guess you are right there. But again, guys, I mean, I know it maybe seems that I'm coming across as very, very harsh on Trump. I mean, I consider the man just a fucking idiot, but not any, but also Hillary is obviously intelligent. I mean, she's not stupid, but she is also very, very clearly sociopathic and may have health issues which actually prevent her from doing the job properly, in the same way that Trump has IQ issues which will likely prevent him from doing the job properly. A man that stupid and a woman that dangerous should not be allowed to run for president. The fact that this is a possibility, quite honestly, terrifies me. I mean, soon they'll have, it's almost like there was a comedian who came out years ago who said, look, when he saw, what's his name, Bush, George W. Bush, he's like, look, that's the first guy that made me feel like I could be president, because here was a guy at my reading level.
Oh my God, that man was. Oh my God, everybody could see him as a, big clown nose and all the rest of it. Everybody could see that he was just a clown and a mouthpiece, and that's probably the reason why he got away with he was up to all these antics with these women and stuff, was because everybody else was running the country for him. Well, this guy, it's a complete clown he was. I mean, it's just downheartening. And now Australia has got so corrupt in its government now. We just had the new blasphemy laws come in Canberra here.
What?
Yeah, I'm serious. Once upon a time, like about 10 years ago, no one would have put up with this shit. But you can't say Islam or Allah and all the rest of it, or
in
you
Australia,
could be put in prison.
I didn't think Australia had a large Muslim population. I mean, how did they manage to campaign for that?
Well, actually, we do have a reasonably large one, because we are near Indonesia, and we always get a whole heap of illegals, and you can't lock them up indefinitely, So we do have a rather large Muslim population, and I outlined what's going on there. It's mainly got to do with birth rate and stuff. Australia's birth rate's going down. I personally don't think it's a bad thing, but the economists have got everybody, all agreeing with, we need more children, and we don't. So they're going to people what are dangerous and saying, come here and have children here in Australia and in Europe, and build up our population, so that we can continue with economic growth. They don't really see the downside of bringing in. The reason why these people breed so much is because their life value systems are completely opposite to us. So Australia wants to make it comfortable, at least in the ACT, for Muslims to come and reproduce. So therefore you can't, they call it vilification law, but it's the same. It's blasphemy law. That's what it is. And a lot of people can't understand, why would Australia do this? Isn't this one of these really progressive countries, laid back and all the rest of it. What people don't realise in Australia is since 1986 we've been under the ASIO Act, what means the Australian government owns every single signal what's sent through Australian airspace. So they don't have to have a warrant to read your emails. They don't need a warrant to intercept your phone or anything like that. They actually own it. They can record anything and everything here in Australia. And it's kind of like Stalinist Russia here in Australia. They'll even high-profile press, they've intimidated into silence by a terror law. What they brought in, what allows ASIO to hold people for 48 hours without trial. And who does that is the AFP. So basically what they do is they turn up on your doorstep and say, you're coming with us, you're under arrest. You ask why? Well, we've been told to pick you up. And they hold you for 48 hours and then they release you. And then in a couple of weeks, they pick you up again, hold you for 48 hours. That's for just criticising the government policy, let alone doing anything wrong.
We kind of had that under, well, I say we, I mean, I guess the Americans had that first with the USA Patriots Act, where it was basically like, anybody criticizing the government, in my view, don't care, so it was that type of atmosphere that was driven by, by Bush, and then unfortunately it's permeated the rest of the Western world. But again, so while we're noticing all of these quite frankly insane laws, anti-blasphemy laws and that kind of thing, I'm still very skeptical about Trump because, I mean, for example, one of the things he said is, look, he's, if China doesn't comply with his demands on renegotiating the WTO, he's going to impose a 45% tariff for guessing that China will retaliate. And China, I think, is what
China really can't retaliate. They've got two options. They can fraudulently withhold their money from the world market, or they could, if they started a war, they would, at this point in time, they would just get wiped off the earth. I mean, it'd take a week. Their troops, for one, aren't actually trained. They're actually just taught. They go for a loyalty test, and then they're given a gun.
I do agree with you. I mean, their training leaves a whole lot to be desired. But I guess the issue that China faces this. China didn't voluntarily buy U.S. debt, and I guess maybe just to kind of explain how U.S. debt now works. U.S. debt, most people who buy it, particularly in the form of bonds, don't do so voluntarily. So that they don't kind of wake up in the morning and say, look, we're going to base some of our net worth or some of the future of our country or some of our foreign exchange, we're going to put it in a scheme where we know that it's going to be devalued over time and we're never going to get paid back. So the way U.S. debt usually works and is sold is that there'll be a discussion between, let's say, the State Department and the, let's say the kind of foreign ministry of a country, and they'll talk about aid. So, we're going to give you aid, or we're going to give you financial or political support, and in return, we want you to buy $100 billion of our debt, which is coming up, at auction in a couple of months. So,
yeah, actually, it works more like the Federal Reserve is the one who does all that, and the World Bank.
They print the debts. So the Federal Reserve create the debt at the behest of the office of the leader, but all of the kind of backdoor negotiating about how the debt's sold. So the debt is sold ever before there's an auction. So all of the buyers are in place, and it's because of the kind of politicking, very, very specifically the politicking that offers things like foreign aid, cheap foreign debt, military backup. So it's all of that kind of behind the doors negotiation. People don't wake up and say, we're essentially going to buy into a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, well, see, it's kind of funny. I did a video on that. I edited a piece of, what was it, a anonymous message, and we're laying out this system of debt for everybody, and everybody screamed conspiracy theory at me. And I'm going, you can actually just Google this shit for yourself. And you would know in 5 minutes. And they're going, oh, my God, he's a conspiracy theorist, And I got that for about a week, just for explaining that. So, yeah. Even Mother MGTOW, they're going, what? Why are you into these conspiracy theories? This is actually kind of how it works. This is exactly how it works. Even Tanzania owns some of, Tanzania owns, and even Nigeria own some of America's debt. That's how far.
Exactly. But when you look at it, when you kind of look at it, buying into debts it's almost senseless, because the US is never going to pay its debt back. And it's going to lose value over time. But one of the things that I want us to also address is, because Nico has pointed this out, Zayt has pointed this out, Mate takes part in MGTOW has pointed this out. So why does intelligence matter in a president? I'm pointing out that from what we see, Trump is a fucking idiot. And why does that matter? But because, a lot of people are asking, and I think it's a very, very legitimate question, well, if he has intelligence advisors around him, it almost doesn't matter. Well, to answer that properly, let's kind of go back in time and look at the Bush presidency. And there was a man who was, for a president, he was very, very low IQ. He wasn't a particularly sharp guy. He needed Condoleezza Rice. I don't think
he was there, actually. Honestly, I don't even think he was there. He was barely cogent.
I agree. Well, he needed an ex-school teacher in Condoleezza Rice to explain foreign policy to him in a manner of an adult. Person. Oh, absolutely.
Condoleezza Rice.
But when you look at it, oh yeah, no,
sorry,
absolutely. No, but when you look at the manner in which he explained things to him, it was in the manner of an adult taking, an errant child to task on, just almost like, this is where Russia is on the map, and so it was almost at that level. But when you look at the policies that came from this man's stupidity, 2 simultaneous wars in the Middle East, wars that America are still involved with today. The idea of nation building, which of course he didn't initiate that idea, but he certainly took it to its zenith in terms of just attacking people. He built up something called an axis of evil, a group of countries who literally had to be attacked if they didn't comply. And he made the world a far more dangerous place as a direct result of that stupidity and the individuals he surrounded himself with.
And the man who criticized that actually is one of our... is one of the references to the talk we should be having soon, was the man who spoke out about it. He was imprisoned for 2 years, called a terrorist. He lost his tenure at his university, and then he was deported to Turkey, where he lived 5 years under house arrest, just for saying it was a stupid idea.
Absolutely, and I think, I think history has, that's the benefit of hindsight, right? It's 2020, and that we now see very, very clearly it was a very, very...
This is a crazy thing, okay? This will tie into what we're doing here, and the Australian blasphemy laws, and this is the demonstration. This guy was locked up for being accused of being sympathetic to Islam, for fuck's sake. Right? This guy actually said, if you do this, you are going to create an Islamic State. Leave this psycho in Iran and on Iraq. Leave them in because they're under control. If you take these countries down, it'll create an Islamic State. What do you think happened? And they gave him a platform just recently, and he goes, yeah, well, how do you feel about what's happened to you and the fact that what you said was going to happen happened? And he just goes, Americans need to really take a stern look at their freedom of speech, where it starts and where it ends. And that was his thing. That's what he said. Drop microphone, gone.
I agree with him, and that is another thing which Bush brought back in, which we, and again I say we, obviously I'm not an American, I don't live in the States, but perhaps an individual living in the West. We haven't seen since the McCarthy era, when Senator McCarthy was going hard at communists and just rooting out any communist quote unquote sympathizers in the States. The idea that you can be jailed for essentially having a political or just a personal belief that the government...
In the ACT now, you can. You literally can get a sentence to prison for criticizing Islam.
Yeah, absolutely.
I shit you not. And that's crazy because Australian politicians... it's two Australian politicians on record saying back in support of invading Iraq, their exact words were, both of them, exact words were, Islam is not a religion of peace. It's mind-blowing. Oh my God! And I forget, there was an American, I forget who it was, an American politician who says, oh yeah, we're going into Iraq, even if it doesn't have weapons of mass destruction, it's an Islamic country, and Islam is not a religion of peace. And now we're going to get locked up for just saying that.
Exactly. And again, while I certainly agree Islam is absolutely not a religion of peace, the idea that as a result of that Western powers should be attacking these countries, I don't think is a good idea. Not only because of things like blowback, I discussed that recently with Stardust, but also just simply because it's incredibly costly. Just the vast amounts of money. Not only of course.
You go into there forever. But
yeah,
literally.
Absolutely. So it makes the world a far less safe place. And then, so I guess there are lots and lots, of us within MGTOW who maybe have, libertarian leanings who say, well, we want to reduce the size of the states. We cannot. Well, yeah, and I agree on many levels, but we cannot have...
It shouldn't be our aim, though. It shouldn't be our manifesto, that's for sure. But we should be concerned with such things as things that lead to male servitude and his imprisonment.
Exactly. And also...
government does that.
Exactly. No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I guess what I was going to say is that we cannot have a small state internally, but an aggressive foreign policy. Those don't go together. So you can't attack people around the world and have a small government. It's physically, just financially, that can't work. You have to have a large government if you're going to have a war, around the world. I mean, money has to be printed to make this happen. So I guess. I found this part of the discussion very, very interesting, and so if one asks you if you were to vote in the U.S. presidential election, would you support Hillary or Trump?
I would have to vote Trump hands down because of like, honestly, if I was American, I would do that. But as being an Australian, I can't not do that if it was my choice. So, because at the moment, what the Democrats are doing in the world right now is so dangerous that a number of country leaders have actually come out on record saying that it's so dangerous that it can lead to a literal total war, World War III, but that makes you sound like a conspiracy theorist. But that's how it's been escalated to that point, and nearly no Americans actually know that. That's the biggest and scariest thing. Trump already has a small relationship already with Putin. Hillary knows him too, but she made a bad impression. But what I think, and what's a consensus among other political academics, is that Trump is probably the only one who can actually convince Putin to allow them to deal with China in the South China Sea. Without the actual blessing of Russia to intervene, they have to step in if you take the hard line. And I know Hillary certainly won't do that. And that will mean a huge hike in everything we buy, and may even lead to the point of these items being in scarcity. Infrastructure that we no longer have in the West by our own stupidity, mind you. And without
the decades of deliberate government policies to turn most of the West into a service sector economy is certainly now taking its toll, and we see that in just the rates of male unemployment. So I guess I have a question for everyone listening. If you could just kind of post in the comments, and I know this is very, very public, but would anybody here support Hillary? Would anybody here support, Trump? I'm going to come out and say, look, I support neither candidate, but if I absolutely had to, if I had a gun to my head, it would actually be Hillary. And it's very, very simple reason. I don't think Hillary's a good candidate. In fact, I think she's a terrible candidate. We're stuck with, it's death by poisoning or death by auto accident type choice. So it's not a very good choice. But I see her as just simply a continuation of the corruption that we've always had in U.S. politics. But my fear with Trump is that he is so inexperienced and he hasn't quite figured out that you cannot run the United States as you would a casino or a golf course or some kind of a building somewhere or a company selling steaks. You can't just refinance, So I guess, again, like most of the individuals in the comments section, I'm completely apolitical. But if I had a gun to my head, it would be Hillary, because Trump seems too stupid for such a role, and I'm worried that his stupidity will bring out the kind of aggressive neoconservative agenda which we saw under Bush, which led to multiple foreign wars that the United States is still involved in. I think Hillary is pragmatic, and I don't necessarily even mean that in a positive way. She is a pure political animal. She is a pure opportunist, and while I don't think that is good, I think that maybe slightly, just a couple of shades, slightly less terrible than a Trump presidency, but either is very, very bad in my opinion. And I think it's a very, very sad day that these are the two candidates that individuals in the US have to choose from. Not that we've had it any better in the UK, for example. We just have politicians who speak with British schoolboy accents over here, but they're not any brighter. So Veritech is saying that I have no clue. That may be the case. But, I guess these are my opinions. But if you have a different position...
No, they are good points. They're good points. But most certainly, as being an Australian, if I see Hillary becoming president, I certainly will be buying my bulletproof jacket and my helmet before they go up in price. Before she fucks up this whole trade thing. But anyway, I know China will take it all away. That's the thing, I know. And they've got nuke subs already floating around there, the Barak Strait and all that. They want to control trade. That's what they want. And I think for the right price, Hillary would give it to them, or it would just start a new war.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a very... We live in a far more dangerous world as a result of the actions of politicians. I'm watching, as we all are, we're watching the outcome of the election with a lot of interest, although we can't influence it. This may be one of the most important elections to date. I mean, Veritek, I guess you strongly disagree with me, and that's completely fine, but I would ask you to advance a position as opposed to just saying, hey, you're wrong or whatever. If you have a position, I would love to, to speak with you about it.
I would like to, hear other feelings, but I think most men identify with Trump, and they see a strong leader, a strong leader, someone we can get behind. But they see Hillary as a pushover. But with Hillary, we see a status quo thing, a person who can be bought out at any time, and I suppose that's less volatile, isn't it? I mean, for the American people, less volatile, less confrontational, what could lead to outcomes, a status quo, higher prices, or could end up in war. But with Trump, you've got a strong leader who might actually do something for the country and actually tell people to F off, for, lobbying groups just to go eat themselves, for stepping up. Because they do this. They say, they even hand out threats sometimes. You need a strong person.
Well, agreed. I actually agree with the coterie MGTOW. He's just posted something. He said, look, it's a cost benefit. Perhaps it's a 5% chance that Trump destroys the world versus a 100% chance with Hillary. With Hillary further enabling feminism. Hillary is a stable reptile. I actually agree with you. She's a stable, corrupt politician, and Trump is like
she's predictable.
Retarded. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think both are absolute nightmares. I really find it difficult to.
If Trump was like 20 IQ points higher, he would be a good candidate.
Yes,
but he doesn't have that.
If he were 20 IQ points higher, he wouldn't be saying the kind of. And here's where maybe I disagree. If he was 20
that's a point. I know where you're going. That's a very good point.
Well, nobody would want to vote for him because then he would be coherent. He would be able to string his sentences along properly. He wouldn't be drumming up the kind of populist policies which sound amazing for a crowd who've either, hopped up on coffee and sugar or hopped up on beers. The free beers that they get at some of these rallies, or the free drinks or whatever. So if Trump were more intelligent, you guys wouldn't like him. He would basically then be Obama or I guess Clinton.
Obama, no. See, Obama's very wishy-washy, and he was an establishment man all the way. And I suppose that's why the Democrats have kind of like crashed the plane and telling everybody it's okay, just jump into the water, just jump out of the boat. It's going down, but don't anybody worry. But it's kind of like that. But if you have a look, I think your point is absolutely dead on. People wouldn't like Trump as much if he was more mild, because have a look at the body language of women around him. Have you seen the body language? They all want him bad.
They get,
they get all
wetter than a man. Yeah, absolutely. Wetter than
For
a
the man,
mermaid's
so.
twat.
They just want him bad. You look
Absolutely.
at some of those. You look at some of those reporters, the female reporters talking to him. They get their feet pointed at him. They got their oh, I'm so cute laugh on, and they put their hands out to touch him. Like anybody who knows body language goes, pa-ching! He's in if he just asks for it.
Well, he's a wealthy alpha male. It's the same reason, for example, that you could have two guys who are same level of wealth, same level of intelligence. If one of those guys is maybe tatted up and he works out, instinctively the women are going to go for that, but because it suggests a kind of, devil-may-care kind of, daredevilry. And again, I don't think it's either,
Okay, that's a primal thing. They go
Absolutely.
looking for the man. See, in this climate, they know what is going to give them security mentally, but their brain, on the other hand, tells them that big man with all the muscles sticking out from his t-shirt, that guy can protect me.
Absolutely.
That guy is a really strong man. So they get this huge turn-on button, but their brain says, "Oh, but he's poor," So you've got that good guy, bad guy policy. They'll bang the bad guy, but they'll settle down with the man with the biggest wallet, yeah?
Absolutely.
And Donald Trump kind of has a little bit of both,
Absolutely.
So the women just, they fling themselves on him, they might as well be flinging their panties on stage when he turns up. Just look at the body language and it's crazy.
Yeah.
But I suppose guys look at that guy and they go, oh, well, the women like him, they're hot for him. I want to be like Trump, so I'm going to be supporting Trump. And I suppose that's where a lot of the meatheads come in to Trump rallies.
Exactly. When, for example, you look at a lot of the discussion within the PUA community about why they like Trump, some of the ideas verge, or some of the reasons given verge on the ridiculous. So it's, he's a quote-unquote shitlord. So it's this extrapolation of the idea that what makes you successful at picking up boss gangs is also the same kind of personality or behavioral traits that make an individual suited to run a country. So they point out that his, all of his ex-wives have been incredibly attractive, and this somehow makes him suited for leadership. So, and again, I'm not knocking individuals who support Trump as somehow stupid. Absolutely not. There are some very, very intelligent individuals who look at Hillary and just say, this woman is a nightmare. She's completely owned by, the corporate lobbyists. So actually, for that reason, I support Trump. But, this is very, very specific to the PUA community. Some of their ideas are actually just downright idiotic. But when you
it's scary when you look at those. When you look at the PUA sites and you look at what's in the comments, you just go, "Oh my God, these guys have IQ levels at standard women level." Everybody take that with a grain of salt. It's kind of a joke, but men do tend to be a lot smarter than women. But these PUAs, they've just got no fucking idea. And the crazy thing is, these guys who are, say, alphas of the PUA community are the ones who actually know the least about women. So anything, you can just dismiss it. I can take home any woman I want any day, any woman I want through knowledge of psychological knowledge, the arts, a number of different technical names and stuff for things that I can make a woman believe that she wants me. Just by neuro-linguistic programming alone, without anything else. And these guys don't even have the most basic understanding of that. And these guys are the ones dispensing dispensing the information to people.
Well, no, I agree. And, for example, Saints has pointed out in the comments section something we've observed, that Roosh is just going into meltdown. And when you get an individual like Roosh, who is really not, Roosh is an entertaining clown.
And a megalomaniac.
Absolutely.
He's maniacal. Yeah,
absolutely.
But
and he's dispensing a lot of advice about, So again, whether an individual votes for Trump or not, that's entirely your thing. And I've met some very, very intelligent individuals who are saying, as somebody pointed out in the comment section, look, people are tired of the status quo, so Trump is a vote for the status quo. I'm sorry, Trump is a vote against the status quo, but he doesn't represent the status quo. So, and I can get that, and I think that's a very, very good argument. But again, some of the, rhetoric coming out of the PUA community is just downright ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah. Their reasons for voting Trump are the most scariest, mind-blowing reasons. Oh, well, this guy's an alpha male. He's got a big black mane, so let's all follow him.
Exactly.
And for no other reason, for no other reason that he just exudes the alpha male and the A-type personality, and they go, well, that's a leader. That's
Absolutely.
not good enough reason. It's definitely not a good enough reason.
Agreed. And this is where I guess I'm very, very worried, because we ought to differentiate between behavior that makes us successful with women or even other people in a society versus behavior that renders an individual better suited to lead the largest economy on earth. One of the world's superpowers. These are not necessarily the same. So the ability to get there in front of an audience and be really, really belligerent. And I don't think Trump is putting on an act with that belligerence. I think that is genuinely him. I think, and that's also where, and that's also where some of his support comes from. That kind of devil-may-care, belligerence, fuck you type of attitude. But again, so while that may, in combination with vast amounts of money, be very, very suited to attracting some of the most beautiful-looking women around, I don't think that translates to automatically being able to run a country.
Oh, it gives you status with men, and that works with other high-status people. Like, not everybody is like cool Putin, who doesn't need a woman hanging off of his arm. But a man walks in with this beautiful woman on his arm. He immediately gets respect from the rest of the pride, I suppose you would call it. He just gets, he's in a position to negotiate. So you kind of need a little bit of everything as far as these things go. And Putin actually has them all, but he is literally a sociopath, 100%. He could sit down at a table with you and say, just wait a moment, I've got to deal with something in the kitchen, chop a guy up with a meat cleaver, come back to, wash his hands, come back, straighten his tie and go and sit down at the table and go, now what were we talking about? And not miss a beat. This guy, he's got game. I mean, whatever happened to him in the KGB has, and what I say from the behaviour that he exudes, he projects, is of one of a gangster. And I don't mean your normal gangster. I'm talking about a hardcore Russian gang, organised crime. And the look on his face, the way he holds himself, is a Russian mafia man. And personally, I don't doubt that he has ties to the Russian mafia, and it was the Russian mafia that actually put him in power. I wouldn't be surprised because I see that look, the cold, dead killer look, the one that is not fazed by anything, and even the tiniest little bit of disrespect he can put down with a hammer, straight away, bang.
Well, a lot of Putin's political opponents have either been exiled, had their assets seized, jailed, or just outright murdered. And it's incredibly troubling. I mean, obviously that's simply the way he runs Russia, and also just as despicable, is putting his friend in the office of presidency so that he could then run again and again and again. And they could just kind of swap back and forth. Then Putin became prime minister, then he became president again. And I mean, there's just again the comments. So Vasily, I mean, look, I think your comments are not evidence-based. So I just think this is possibly the wrong platform for those type of comments. So, dude, tone it down.
No. If he's right, and then I want to hear it.
Yeah,
but if he's not...
yeah, absolutely. If that's your position, advance evidence. Otherwise,
all right. Well, with Putin, I can personally, this is. If I was doing a psychological profile on him that I do get paid for to do, okay, in the intelligence industry, and my first go-to by what he's done, the way he carries himself and the look in his face and the way he behaves, is that he is a very, very successful, organized mafia man. And I would say that came from when the Soviet Union broke down, and the KGB was dispersed. He had to find money. Well, he found a home in the Russian mafia. He's been very good at it. He is very, very charismatic and very good at the game. And I believe that is the reason why he's been so successful. I could forward other evidence, but I wouldn't have references to directly give you. But the way he carries himself in public, and the sunglasses, he always has really expensive sunglasses on, and that is what we call peacocking, and what's basically a maneuver amongst men to show dominance and to dispel disrespect. And these are the things that you see in the Russian mafia a lot. And that I'm terrified of the Russian mafia. Yeah. One of the reasons, that they are really hardcore people. And if he has survived in that world, he's going to be leader of Russia for a long time. And he can...
Possibly for life. He may be the kind of old-style dictator that we haven't seen for a long time, that takes office, in his early kind of 40s. And literally, it's almost like, Fidel Castro in Cuba, that you realize, even when he's senile, that people will still carry out his edicts, despite the kind of senility there, simply because he has an entire machinery built up, geared towards making the things he wants, to have happen.